Welcome to Revolution Chronicles. Today, we journey into the heart of Texas, down a highway where travelers vanished without a trace. For decades, families were left searching, only to find empty roads and abandoned cars. What secrets lie in the dust and shadows of this lost highway? Stay with us and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more hidden chapters of American history. The sun burned low over the endless Texas plains, casting long shadows across a land that seemed untouched by time. Dust swirled in the dry wind, dancing in golden streaks across the horizon. Out here, roads weren't just paths, they were lifelines, carved into the earth with little more than sweat, hope, and the occasional horse-drawn grater. Travelers who dared to leave the safety of the towns were often swallowed by the vastness, and few would ever speak of the fear they felt as they crossed these lonely stretches. In the 1920s and 1930s, life in Texas was rugged. Towns were small, separated by dozens of miles of sun-baked land. Gas stations were few and far between, often little more than wooden shacks with hand-pumped gasoline and a tired attendant who might wave travelers on with a toothless grin. People relied on the slow rhythm of life. Letters carried by the post, news shared at the general store, and the occasional radio broadcast crackling faintly over the hills. There were no GPS devices, no cell phones, just maps that were worn and torn, and a hope that you could reach your destination before nightfall. The roads themselves were a challenge. Dirt paths turned into quagmires when rain came, swallowing tires and stranding travelers in mud that seemed bottomless. In the summer, the heat pressed down with a relentless weight, baking the asphalt, or in most cases, the dirt roads, until it cracked and shimmered in the distance. Night brought a different kind of danger. The absence of streetlights left travelers to navigate by the faint glow of the moon and the distant flicker of a farmhouse lantern. Coyotes howled across the plains, and the wind carried whispers that seemed almost human. Along these lonely highways, vehicles were becoming more common, but they were still fragile. Model Ts rumbled along the rough roads, their engines straining against gravel and dust. Tires punctured easily, and breakdowns were frequent. Imagine being hundreds of miles from the nearest town, your car silent in the middle of nowhere, and no one around for miles. The fear of isolation was very real. Families learned to carry water, spare parts, and blankets, but even the best-prepared traveler could vanish into the vast emptiness of West Texas with nothing left behind. The towns themselves offered a stark contrast to the harshness of the road. Small wooden structures lined dusty streets, and a single main road usually cut through the heart of town. General stores stocked cans of beans, sacks of flour, and the occasional luxury like coffee or soap. Gas stations doubled as social hubs, where travelers and locals exchanged stories, news, and warnings about the conditions ahead. People here were tough, hardened by the sun, the wind, and the land. But even they whispered about the strange disappearances on the highways, shaking their heads at the stories that seemed too strange to believe, yet too frequent to ignore. Families planning a journey often left with a sense of both excitement and unease. Trips that would take a few hours on paper could stretch into full days, depending on the condition of the roads. Crossing the vast expanses between towns required careful planning. Travelers had to ration supplies, anticipate weather changes, and keep a wary eye on their surroundings. One wrong turn could mean becoming lost in an endless landscape of sagebrush, mesquite trees, and rolling hills that all looked the same in the fading light. And yet there was beauty in the isolation. The sunsets were spectacular, painting the plains in streaks of orange, pink, and violet. The night sky, unpolluted by city lights, stretched endlessly overhead, revealing a universe full of stars. Travelers felt a sense of awe and reverence in the quiet moments between towns. But beneath that beauty lay an undercurrent of danger, a reminder that the land did not forgive mistakes lightly and that its secrets were many. By the time the 1940s arrived, Texas highways were slowly improving. Some stretches were paved, others still rutted with deep tracks carved by years of wagon wheels and tires. But the isolation remained. It was this combination of vastness, fragile infrastructure, and sparse populations that created the perfect conditions for mysteries to take root. Disappearances could happen quickly, silently, and without a trace. Families were left with questions that could never be answered, and the roads themselves seemed to swallow stories along with travelers. The Lost Highway was just one of these roads, stretching for miles without a single stop between towns. Its name wasn't official, but it was whispered by locals who knew its dangers all too well. They spoke of travelers who left at dawn and were never seen again, of cars found abandoned with doors wide open, and of belongings scattered as if their owners had simply vanished into thin air. In a place where isolation was normal, these disappearances carried a weight of fear that no amount of bravery could shake. It was on this desolate stretch that ordinary journeys became stories of suspense and tragedy. A man driving to visit family, a couple eloping in secret, a salesman heading to the next town, all were swallowed by the landscape, leaving nothing but questions. What made this highway different from all the others? Was it the remoteness, the harsh weather, or something darker? The answers would remain elusive for years, as whispers grew into legends and legends began to overshadow reality. Traveling the Lost Highway in the 1920s or 1930s was a test of courage, preparation, and sheer luck. Every mile carried uncertainty, and every stop at a lonely gas station or general store reminded travelers of how fragile life could be out here. Those who dared to drive these roads did so with a mixture of determination and trepidation, never fully knowing whether they would reach their destination or vanish like so many before them. And so the stage was set. The vast, unforgiving Texas plains stretched endlessly, a land of beauty, danger, and unanswered questions. The Lost Highway beckoned travelers with its promise of passage and its hidden threat of disappearance. Families packed their cars, drivers tightened their grips on steering wheels, and the journey began, each mile carrying the weight of both hope and fear. It began quietly. At first, no one spoke of it in hushed tones. No legends had yet formed. The highway was just another ribbon of dirt cutting through the plains used by families, drifters, and traveling salesmen who made their living one dusty town at a time. But then came the first stories, small, almost forgettable mentions in local newspapers or whispered across general store counters, that a man or woman had set out on the road and never come home. One of the earliest cases was in the summer of 1931. A young couple, Robert and May Collins, newly married and full of hope, packed their Model A Ford with a few belongings and set off toward Amarillo, where Robert had a cousin offering him steady work. They waved goodbye to Robert's parents, promising to write as soon as they settled. The couple was expected by evening, yet they never arrived. Days passed, search parties were organized, and farmers combed the land along the highway. What they found only deepened the mystery. The Ford sat neatly at the side of the road, doors unlocked, a picnic basket still half full on the back seat. But Robert and May were gone. No footprints stretched into the dust, no sign of struggle was visible, and no clue revealed where the couple had gone. The papers called it a tragedy, but locals began to whisper that the highway had taken them. Not long after, in the early months of 1933, another case shook the small towns that relied on the road. A traveling salesman named Edward Martin left Childress, Texas, with a trunk full of kitchenware and the promise of returning with new orders. He was known for his friendly smile and his knack for storytelling at roadside diners. Edward was last seen filling his tank at a lone gas station before heading north. When his car was later discovered, it was miles down the highway, abandoned, its headlights still faintly glowing, as if he had stopped only moments earlier. The trunk stood wide open, samples scattered in the dirt, as though dropped in haste. But Edward himself was nowhere to be found. Neighbors and friends searched every ditch, every stretch of brushland. Nothing. His disappearance spread fear among other traveling salesmen, who began avoiding the route altogether, even if it meant losing business. By the mid-1930s, the disappearances had become harder to dismiss. In 1935, a schoolteacher named Clara Thompson vanished while driving home from visiting her sister. She was 32 years old, dependable and beloved in her small community. When she failed to show up for class the next morning, alarms spread quickly. Her car was found neatly parked along the highway, bonnet still warm as if she had just stepped away for a moment. Inside the car, her purse remained untouched, a letter to her sister carefully folded in the glove box. To her friends and pupils, Clara was a woman of order and caution. The idea that she might abandon her car and wander into the plains was unthinkable. Yet she was gone, leaving only silence behind her. Each new case added a weight of dread to the road. Farmers traveling into town began avoiding the highway at night, preferring longer, safer routes. Mothers warned their children never to linger near the roadside after sundown. Gas station attendants, often the last to see these travelers, spoke of strange encounters, customers who looked nervous, glancing at the empty horizon as if they sensed something watching them. Then came one of the most chilling disappearances of the decade. In 1937, the Harper family, father, mother, and their two young children, set out from Wichita Falls to visit relatives farther south. They packed their sedan with blankets, food, and toys for the children, expecting an uneventful drive. Days later, their car was discovered on the side of the lost highway. The doors stood open as though the family had stepped out briefly. The children's dolls were scattered on the ground, the picnic basket overturned. But the Harpers themselves had vanished entirely, 4 people gone without a single trace. Neighbors remembered the Harpers as a warm, church-going family, the sort who brought pies to Sunday socials. Their disappearance struck the community like a thunderclap. Whispers turned into fear, and the road earned a new name, the Lost Highway. Newspapers occasionally reported on these tragedies, but often they downplayed the events, chalking them up to bandits, accidents, or poor planning. Yet locals knew better. Cars don't abandon themselves. Families don't vanish without leaving something behind. In an age without modern forensics, the mysteries deepened and speculation flourished. The rhythm of these disappearances was unsettling. They came sporadically, one in spring, another in summer, sometimes months apart. But the consistency was undeniable. Those who traveled the road alone or even in families risked becoming the next story told in hushed tones at a general store counter. People began leaving behind instructions before journeys, who to contact if they didn't arrive, what to do if the car was found without them. Some even carried revolvers, convinced that bandits or desperate drifters were to blame. Yet no evidence of robbery ever appeared. Money, jewelry, even the vehicles themselves were left untouched. By the end of the 1930s, the Lost Highway was more than just a stretch of road. It was a shadow that hung over every nearby community. Families dreaded traveling it, yet for many there was no choice. It connected towns, farms, and businesses. Avoiding it entirely meant isolation. And so, with quiet prayers and steady hands on their steering wheels, men and women continued to drive the road, glancing nervously into the dark fields that stretched endlessly on either side. What made the disappearances most terrifying was their ordinariness. These were not reckless drifters or shady characters. They were schoolteachers, farmers, salesmen, families with children, good, hard-working Americans whose only mistake was trusting the highway to carry them safely home. Their stories blended into local memory, but the fear remained raw. The highway seemed cursed, and each empty car left at the roadside served as a grim reminder that not everyone who traveled its length would ever reach their destination. By the late 1930s, the Lost Highway was no longer just a road. It had become a shadow in the minds of those who lived near it, a place where the ordinary rules of life seemed to unravel. Travelers vanished, yes, but what people whispered in back rooms, in churchyards, and at kitchen tables late at night was often stranger than the facts themselves. Locals spoke of strange lights that appeared across the plains, distant orbs glowing white or blue, bobbing like lanterns in the distance. Some said they hovered just far enough away to lure a traveler off the road. Drivers swore they had followed those lights, thinking them to be farmhouses or oncoming vehicles. only to find themselves staring into empty fields. It was as though the lights wanted me to follow, one farmer confessed years later, and when I stopped the truck to look closer, I felt a chill that went right down to my bones. Others told of ghostly hitchhikers. More than one driver claimed to see a lone figure standing at the roadside in the moonlight, often a woman dressed in pale clothing. They would stop, but when they opened the door, the figure had vanished. One trucker, hardened by years on the road, broke down in tears describing how he had seen a little girl walking barefoot along the highway at midnight. He swerved to avoid her, pulled over to help, and found nothing but empty dust swirling under his headlights. "I'll never forget that," he said. "The face of that child, I saw it as clear as I see yours now." Gas station attendants, the last friendly faces before the long stretch of emptiness, often carried their own stories. Some swore that travelers who filled their tanks late at night seemed different. Nervous, distracted, glancing constantly over their shoulders. One old attendant told a story of a young man who bought gas, drank 2 cups of coffee in quick succession, and whispered, "Do you see them too?" When asked what he meant, the man only shook his head, got back in his car, and drove off into the darkness. He never reached his destination. The plains themselves seemed alive to those who lived near the lost highway. Ranchers sometimes found cattle dead without explanation. No signs of predators, no illness, just lifeless bodies sprawled near the road. Hunters told of hearing voices in the brush, whispers that carried on the wind though no one was there. Families living near the road reported hearing car doors slam in the night, followed by silence even though no vehicle had passed. Then came the tale of the shadow rider. Beginning in the 1940s, rumors spread of a phantom horseman said to follow travelers at night. Some described hearing the rhythmic pounding of hooves alongside their car, though nothing could be seen in the darkness. Others claimed to glance in their rearview mirror and catch sight of a rider cloaked in black, only for the vision to vanish when they turned around. To those who believed in the story, the shadow rider was no mere ghost, he was a harbinger. If you saw him, they said, your chances of surviving the lost highway were slim. Church sermons occasionally warned against the dangers of superstition, reminding congregations that only God decided the fate of travelers. But even the most devout could not shake the feeling that something unnatural clung to that stretch of road. Children dared each other to walk a mile of it alone at night. Few completed the challenge. Most returned running, swearing they heard footsteps behind them or whispers calling their names. The Lost Highway's reputation grew so notorious that some families began refusing to travel it after sundown. Farmers chose longer routes, truckers formed convoys when possible, and parents prayed when their children left for errands in distant towns. Yet, despite the warnings, accidents and disappearances continued. Each new case breathed more life into the legends. To outsiders, the tales sounded like typical small-town folklore, born of fear and isolation. But for those who lived there, the stories carried the weight of truth. The Lost Highway was not merely dangerous, it was alive with a presence no one could fully explain. And so, in the dim light of oil lamps and under the star-filled skies of Texas nights, the legends were passed down. From grandfather to grandson, from mother to daughter, whispered at supper tables and around campfires, stories of lights that beckoned, voices that called, figures that vanished into thin air. Whether ghostly or earthly, the result was the same. The road had claimed its victims, and the people of Texas had given it a name to match its reputation, the Lost Highway. The years turned into decades, and still the legend of the Lost Highway refused to fade. Generations passed, but the whispers remained, growing like weeds in the cracks of memory. For many Texans, that lonely stretch of road became more than a place. It became a symbol. A reminder that even in a world of maps and mile markers, there are still places where certainty slips away, where men and women vanish as if the land itself swallows them whole. By the late 20th century, the story of the vanished travelers was woven into local folklore. Children in nearby towns grew up hearing warnings about the highway that eats people. Parents used it as a lesson in caution. Teenagers, daring and reckless, sometimes drove out late at night, headlights slicing through the dark to see if the legends were true. Most came back laughing, full of bravado, but always with a shiver in their bones when silence settled across the road. But not everyone came back. Even in modern times, reports surfaced, strange disappearances that echoed the past. A hunter, last seen driving home along the stretch, never reached his family's door. A young couple heading back from a concert in Dallas called relatives to say they were almost home. They never arrived. Police found their car days later, sitting silent at the roadside, keys still in the ignition, doors unlocked. No sign of a struggle, no sign of life. It was the same story over and over again, trails that led to nowhere. With modern technology came modern attempts to solve the mystery. Satellite imaging, GPS tracking, highway patrol logs, all tools of the new age were turned toward this old problem. But the answers remained elusive. Officers admitted that the cases left them uneasy. One state trooper, interviewed anonymously in the 1990s, confessed, "I've driven that stretch 100 times. And still, every time I pass through, I feel it. Like the land is watching, like it's waiting." Not everyone believed, of course. Skeptics pointed to natural dangers. They said the road's remoteness made it easy for criminals to strike unseen. They said wild animals, rivers, or desert heat could explain the vanishings. They said fear itself had a way of inventing ghosts. And yet, when asked why the pattern kept repeating, why cars were found in working condition with no sign of violence, none of the skeptics had a good answer. For local families, the mystery was no abstract puzzle. It was a wound. There were mothers who never buried their sons, fathers who never knew what happened to their daughters. They sat on porches and looked to the horizon, wondering if the road still held their loved ones' last footsteps. At community gatherings, voices lowered when the highway was mentioned. Some families never drove it, taking long detours just to avoid its shadow. Others left offerings, small crosses, flowers, even children's toys, by the roadside, hoping their gestures might quiet restless spirits. And then came the ghost stories. Truckers swore they'd seen pale figures walking the shoulder at night, waving for a ride only to vanish when approached. Locals whispered of phantom headlights in the distance, bright beams that appeared in the rearview mirror and then dissolved into darkness. Some told of hearing voices when they pulled over, faint cries in the wind calling out for help. Whether imagination, grief, or something unexplainable, the stories grew into a tapestry of fear and fascination. Today, the highway remains. Its asphalt has been patched and repaved, its shoulders widened in some parts. Yet even with modern improvements, its reputation lingers. Travelers still drive with unease, glancing at their fuel gauges, checking their mirrors, whispering silent prayers. For the lost are never far from memory. Their absence is written into the land, a shadow that no daylight fully erases. Perhaps that is the true weight of the lost highway. It is not only about the vanishings themselves, but about what they say to us. That for all our progress, for all our highways and technology, there remain corners of this world where control slips through our fingers. That sometimes, despite our searchlights and our science, people simply vanish, leaving behind only silence and questions. And so the highway waits. A long stretch of road through the Texas wilderness, as ordinary as any other, until it isn't. For those who vanished, it remains their last known place. For the living, it remains a warning, a reminder that America's vastness still holds secrets, some too heavy to bear, some too stubborn to yield to truth. So if you ever find yourself in Texas driving late at night, and your path leads you to that lonely road, remember the stories. Remember the families who never saw their loved ones again. And when the silence grows too deep and the darkness presses close, ask yourself, will you pass through untouched, or will the lost highway claim another name? As time marched on, the stories of the lost highway became more than unsolved cases. They became legends. Around campfires, in diners, and at family gatherings, People whispered about what might have happened to those who disappeared. Each tale carried the same mixture of fear and awe, for the truth was forever just out of reach. Some spoke of bandits, remnants of the old frontier days, who preyed on travelers and left no trace. They said the wide emptiness of Texas gave cover to men who lived beyond the law and that the disappearances were their work. But the flaw in that theory was always the same. The bandits never left evidence. No stolen goods showed up in pawnshops, no bodies surfaced, and even thieves rarely erased all signs of struggle. Others swore the land itself was cursed. They said long before Texas highways carved through the earth, the land had seen violence, raids, massacres, unmarked graves. Perhaps the soil carried memories too heavy to rest. And perhaps those who crossed it unknowing were pulled into that darkness claimed by restless spirits. Elders in some communities repeated old warnings: never build on land that remembers blood, never take the shortest path if it cuts through sorrow. Then came the stranger theories, the ones spoken only in hushed tones. Some wondered if the disappearances were not of this world at all. They pointed to strange lights in the sky, reported by ranchers on lonely nights. They whispered that the lost were not buried but taken, lifted into realms we cannot see, leaving behind only silence. These stories drew laughter from skeptics, but they never quite went away. Still others looked to the earth, not the heavens. They spoke of sinkholes and caves hidden beneath the scrubland, swallowing travelers whole. The Texas landscape is dotted with limestone caverns, many unexplored. Could it be that wagons, cars, even families had slipped into the earth itself, leaving no sound, no escape? Searchers scoured the area, but the land is vast and the openings few. The theory lingered, half believed, half doubted. Through all the speculation, one truth endured: the road carried sorrow, families remembered, communities remembered, and memory itself became part of the haunting. Mothers clutched photographs of sons who never came home. Fathers left a place at the table year after year. Children grew up hearing the names of aunts, uncles, cousins who had vanished long before their birth. The weight of absence was passed down like an heirloom no one wanted but no one could throw away. In some towns, annual vigils were held. Candles lined church steps, prayers rose into the night. Names were read aloud, some familiar, others nearly forgotten. It was not only grief but defiance, an act of saying, "We will not let them vanish twice, once from the road and once from memory." And so, the Lost Highway became not just a place on the map, but a place in the American imagination. It was a reminder of how fragile life is, how quickly certainty can turn to questions. It was also a symbol of something deeper, the mystery at the heart of the frontier, the edge where man meets the unknown. Even today, when headlights cut through its darkness, the road carries that weight. Modern drivers may know nothing of the old tales, but still some report a chill when they pass through. They speak of radios cutting out, of strange silences where crickets fall quiet, of a feeling they cannot name. They drive a little faster, grip the wheel a little tighter, as if trying to escape an invisible gaze. But perhaps that is the true power of the Lost Highway, not just in the stories of who vanished, but in what it makes us feel. Vulnerable, small, aware that even in a nation mapped and measured, there remain places where answers slip beyond our grasp. And so the legend endures. Travelers vanish, families wait. The road stretches on, a ribbon of dust and asphalt, holding secrets older than the wheels that cross it. And somewhere just beyond the edge of certainty, the lost remain, silent, unseen, yet never forgotten. And so the Lost Highway of Texas remains, unchanged, unforgiving and unsettled. A stretch of earth where the ordinary rules of life seem to break, where men and women have vanished without a trace, leaving only questions that echo across generations. Perhaps the truth is buried in the soil, or perhaps it lies in stories too old to remember. But the silence of that road speaks louder than any explanation. It reminds us that America's past is not only about what we built, but also about what we lost along the way. Every lantern left unlit, every wagon abandoned, every car found empty tells the same tale. Some roads are more than paths across the land. They are passages into the unknown. This has been Revolution Chronicles. If the shadows of history move you as they move us, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell icon. Stay with us because America's forgotten past still has many secrets waiting to be told. Until next time, remember, not all who travel the highway come home.